Force is strong in my family. The Force is strong in my family. My father has it. My father has it. I have it. I have it. My sister has it. My sister has it. You have that power too. You have that power too. In time, you'll learn to use it as I have.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Chewie, we're home.
My Nerd World.
Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode number 25 of the My Nerd World Star Wars podcast. I am your host, John Justice, and a special podcast this week. It was supposed to be done for Halloween, but that didn't happen. So I'm going to keep with the theme of talking about the dark side. That was the whole idea behind the podcast this week. We're going to run through some news items first, but I want to welcome to the podcast a very special guest who carries the dubious honor of being the only other person to have ever been on the podcast with me. And we'll just call him Drew. Hello, Drew.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing well. And for those that don't, for those that aren't or didn't hear the previous podcast that you joined me on, I'm trying to think. We've done two podcasts, right, or just one?
Two. Specifically, Star Wars podcasts. I only remember doing one,
and that was after the one of the. I think it was the second teaser trailer, right? Isn't that one?
It was after the Vanity Fair spread. When Vanity Fair did the the Star Wars spread, the Star Wars magazine that they always do. It was right after that came out.
Well, and my intent was, and I may still do this, so you can actually sort of be the jump off point. Was I have some new technology, which makes it a heck of a lot easier for me now. It's this fancy thing called Skype, which makes it easier now for me to bring guests on the podcast. But we are 6 Fridays away from the release of the movie. I like saying that as opposed to 50 some odd days or 40 some odd days. 6 Fridays doesn't sound nearly as long.
Yeah, 6 Fridays sounds a lot less.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot fewer.
That sounds like that's just some Fridays.
That's a handful of Fridays. That's all that
crap
is.
In between.
It's nearly a week's worth of Fridays.
There's going to be a lot of junk that has to be gone through in between those Fridays, but it's still 6 Fridays. So the thought was, let's get a guest on for every podcast leading up to the actual release of the movie. So you get to be this week's guest.
I am honored to be your first guest.
I put a lot of thought into this, meaning I texted Drew right before I went live and said,
"Right,
would you like to go on the podcast this week?" So I want to run through a couple of news items, and then I know you're short on time, so you won't be able to be with me for the entire podcast this week.
No, just a brief visit.
We're broadcasting live. This is kind of fun. Like it's new for me. We do it every single day. But I want to run through a couple of news items, and this first one is tailor-made to have you on the podcast with me, seeing that you're in radio, and we just got through today having a conversation about political correctness, because in the show that you do in Minneapolis and the show that I do here in Tucson, we cover a lot of these issues, and we've both kind of noticed that there is this there's been a lot of political correctness that's sort of rampant political correctness that's really increased in the past 5 years noticeably, and it seems as if there is a reaction, almost a backlash that's beginning to take place, and you've noticed this quite a bit. Have you noticed the backlash? This plays into this first news item for the podcast this week. It's Star Wars related, but have you noticed the backlash all that much yet? Or are you still seeing sort of the increase in the trajectory going up of political correctness?
I feel like it's still on the up trajectory. The only instance, where I see some like mainstream pushback is South Park, the season of South Park. And it's refreshing to see how positive that is being accepted, how positively the reviews are coming in for that from some outside sources. But until like I started watching this season of South Park, I didn't feel like anywhere outside of some libertarian leaning, conservative leaning blogs and shows, I didn't feel like there was any pushback. I mean, you've got mainstream magazines and newspapers, Rolling Stone pushing it. You've got entertainment embracing this idea of microaggressions and trigger warnings and all these speech codes. So no, it wasn't until I talked to you earlier today that I felt like, oh, okay, maybe there are some things that I'm out there missing. But all in all, I still feel like it's on the up trajectory.
Well, it's interesting too because I listen to a lot of different Star Wars podcasts just because I've just been feeding that need, and a lot of them have been focusing on the sort of increased diversity of Star Wars, at least in their eyes. I tend to believe that it's always kind of been there. I think the Star Wars has actually done a much better job, even back in the 70s, of having diversity, especially when you look at even just A New Hope and how much of a powerful figure they made Princess Leia in that original movie. I mean, she was, she was giving grief to all the men there, and that was definitely against sort of stereotype of the 70s.
Yeah,
with that being
that makes
said,
me laugh when you talk. When people did complain about the so-called lack of diversity in Star Wars, it really made me laugh because you just look at how many alien creatures there were. So it was really only diversity by Earth standards.
Well,
it was like they're not diverse enough for Earth. But
here's the thing, though: the majority of these, not all of them, but the majority of ones that I hear this from, these are millennials doing these podcasts. And not to denigrate any of them, but it's sort of the world that we live in now, and the mentality of a certain generation of individuals where they've sort of been conditioned into thinking that we've never had diversity before in movies or in Star Wars, and it really isn't true. I mean, you could see more, of course, but at the end of the day, they were really diverse in movies at the time, and I think that a lot of the millennials and these individuals that do some of these podcasts really are out of the loop, and are sort of regurgitating what they're being fed on other social levels.
And plus, they're looking for it. I mean, they're actively looking for examples to point out, to sort of demonstrate how aware they are. It's like an awareness contest. Who can point out the most examples,
right,
of microaggressions or lack of diversity. So I think when you go into it with that mindset, you could pop on any movie and find an example or two of that doesn't meet your whatever standards you hold dear today.
Well, and
it's ridiculous to hold movies from the 70s and 80s to the standards that we have today. I mean, it was different. We had different standards then.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because over the weekend, not that I want to get to the story because I know you're short on time, but it was funny for Halloween. I ended up watching Something Wicked This Way Comes, and we actually had spoken about this before I watched it. And you're right, that movie holds up really, really well. I mean, surprisingly well. But one of the main characters in there, one of the main villains in there was a black female in a seductive role to a certain extent as part of that circus in Pam Grier. And I was just watching it. I was just like, I bet if we retrospectively went back and looked more comprehensively at other movies, you would see that there actually was a fairly decent amount of representation where people say there wasn't. All right, let me get to this before you got to go. So speaking of political correctness, this has been a point of contention in the Star Wars universe over the past year or so, and I've heard this discussed quite a bit on other podcasts. I'm on makingstarwars.net. They put an article up today, and it goes like this. A while ago, I heard that the Princess Leia slave outfit costume is being retired from the Star Wars IP for merchandising and marketing. I took it to mean that Leia's gold bikini wouldn't be used in marketing materials for toys. This isn't exactly the era to see Leia in her captive costume, so it was sort of a, well, who cares rumor at this point. And basically he goes on to talk about a Star Wars comic book artist who has stated implicitly that Disney is wiping out the slave outfit from any future products. You will not see it in the future of merchandising featuring the slave outfit ever again. You can't even draw Leia in a sexy pose at Marvel, let alone that outfit, according to this one particular source.
Weird.
Dumb.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, I agree. It is weird. It is dumb. But I will say that outfit has been fetishized quite a bit. Fetishized. Almost more than anything else in the pop culture sci-fi pantheon.
Okay.
That.
How so?
Well, how many times have you heard? I mean, Friends did a whole episode.
Right.
About how it's every man's fantasy.
Okay.
To be with someone who is dressed up like Leia in that outfit. It's sort of been accepted amongst men of our age that was a pretty big moment in our coming of age, so to speak. So it's been fetishized. So I can see why they made that decision. I don't agree with it. I think it's kind of dumb. It's a part of the whole Star Wars experience and pantheon. But I'm not surprised. I guess I'll put it that way.
Well, most of the talk that I had seen hadn't been focused around the sort of fetishized part of it, but the implication of her being a slave. That's the argument that I've heard other people.
Oh,
that's the argument.
I just jumped right to the sex.
I know. See, it is funny because I'm sitting back going, and what's wrong with being sexy? Sexist. Oh, sexist.
See, I didn't even think about it from that way.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I don't think you're off the mark. And it's interesting that you went that direction because most of the complaints that I've heard in regards to that costume have been, and actually there was a news story that I covered not too long ago about a father and his daughter who were in the toy section and saw the slave Leia costume and they all freaked out because people do that. And it's not even that people do that. It's just that we talk about people doing that now.
Yeah.
Social networking and Facebook, you get one person posting one thing and you get 5 people to comment and suddenly it's fervor and outrage and it's not real. But that was the focus that, well, it's a slave and we can't have her called a slave even if she was to Jabba the Hutt. So that seems
this it sounds like a pun and it's not, but this whitewashing of yes.
I need you to either come watch this chicken or go grab him.
Give me 1 minute. I'll go grab him. This whitewashing of the concept of slavery as if, well, we can't talk about it because if we don't talk about it, then it's like it never happened.
Right.
We should talk about it and kids should know what it is and how horrible it is and how wrong it is. Right. And that's what makes Jabba the Hutt a villain was that he did that.
She killed him.
Yes, she killed him. I mean, villains do bad things to good people. You need that in any sort of hero story. You need villains doing awful things. Now, if we're going to take away the awful things because it might make someone feel bad, then we're not going to have any villains anymore. And if we don't have any villains, we don't have any heroes.
True story. Hey, I'll let you go take care of your chicken.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, we'll do it. We'll do it again real soon when you don't have to go wash. You have to go wash the chicken?
Watch.
Oh, watch. The chicken's dirty. It needs to be washed.
He's got to be back at the school at 6:30. We're on time.
You're getting yelled at.
I know you are. Thank you, Drew. I appreciate it.
All right, man.
We know who's the slave in your household.
Yeah, I'm wearing a gold bikini. It's oddly enough.
Oh, no, that's not. No.
It's purely coincidental, though.
Yeah, of course. All right. Thank you, Drew. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Bye.
We go way back. Andrew. We go way back. He For those that have missed him on previous, haven't heard him on previous podcasts, he used to produce and be my program director at the radio station I still currently work at, and